Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. Today there are four of all of us, and I will not do a roll call. And I'm going, actually, maybe I will, but I am struggling with rhymes. I'm not ill, but there's Alan, who is a person there. Alan isn't made up of thin air. And there's Rita down over this way. Rita is not made up of hay. And Matthew there is directly below. Matthew does not have an eerie glow. We're talking about playtesting. That part is true. We will talk about playtesting, maybe with you. If you have any comments about this thing, then put them in, and this is the end of the section where I sing. Board games and playtesting, it's what we're talking about. Board games and playtesting. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning. And
it gets better and better, Bez. It gets better and better.
Hello. Like the more I strain and struggle with these rhymes, I feel like the more that people are like, "What is this? It's already gone off the rails." It's in time for Alan Answers All and Fragen. And hello, J Foolsguard. It is lovely to see you. And hello, Robert. And yep, this is true. There are other bits where I sing. It is lovely to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us for 298 of Bezzy Beats and Board Game Bladder. So yeah, 2 episodes away from episode 300, when I'm going to take a break directly. So that's going to be the end of the streak. I've decided that's it. I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to take a day off on Friday and then Sunday. And then next week, I'm going to take 3 days off just to kind of, you know, give myself a wee bit of a break because, yeah. But I'll talk about all of that in a couple of days. Today, what are we doing? We are discussing playtesting with Alan Paull, Matthew Dunstan, and Rita Modl. We are having a deep dive into playtesting. We've already talked about coming up with the idea. We've already talked about prototyping. I mean, everyone who watches this will know what playtesting is, but we'll get a wee bit into like what's a good playtest, how can you run good feedback, and honestly, there's not a lot of organization to this. We're just going to wing it as we go.
I like winging it. It's great, isn't it? In answer to Xate, alle Fragen werden beantworten. There you go. But really, it ought to be Rita saying this because, you know, Rita can critique my German if you like.
There we have.
Was that close? Was that close, Rita?
I understand it. It was near close. It's called Alle Fragen werden beantwortet.
Didn't I say werden? I thought I said werden. Alle Fragen werden beantworten. Oh, my.
Na, beantwortet.
Beantwortet. Beantwortet. Oh, beantwortet.
You're so close to perfect.
Very close.
Adjacent to perfect.
But ich werde alle Fragen beantworten.
Oh, I see. Of course.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's... Yeah, it's close though. I'm getting there.
Moving on from the regular let's learn German parts of the show, let me ask everyone around here, what are you expecting to talk about on this show? Alan, who are you? Why are you here?
Who am I? I'm always asking that. Who am I? I am Alan Paull. I'm a game designer of the older perspective. I've been game designing for a while. I'm very interested in playtesting. I've brought with me Peter Perler, himself, The Art of Wargaming, which has a whole section on playtesting for wargaming, which I thought we might maybe have a little talk about as well. So yeah, I'm very keen on this and like to do a vague chat about playtesting with these other knowledgeable folks.
Awesome. And Rita, who are you? What's going on with you?
Hello, I'm Rita. I'm also a board game designer. And so I think this is why playtesting. This is one of the most important thing when you start designing a game. It is one of the first thing you learn that you have to playtest a lot. And I think this is what when you start off, oh, I want to design a game, you don't have that in mind, that this is such a big part of designing. And it's sometimes it's very helpful, sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes you wanna throw it all away. And so that I think that's one of the most big part of designing. Yeah.
And a quick hello to Drawn Onwards. It's lovely to have you join us for this chat, and I hope you learned some useful things. And hello, just dropping in for a few days to say hello. Wow,
I think this stream is going to be longer than what I expected it to be.
Yeah. I might need a break then later on. Yeah.
Well, Rob's just going to be camping out here, waiting for my tomorrow's day stream, and then waiting for that episode 300 on Thursday. We're all now live streaming Rob's entire life. But Matthew Dunstan. Yeah, I know, Rob. I assumed that. But Matthew Dunstan, who are you and why are you here?
Yeah, I'm Matt Dunstan. I'm increasingly a human furball, as I think it's the longest I've ever cut my hair. Yeah, I'm a game designer, Australian game designer, living in Prague, and actually quite interested in languages. So I'm gonna steer us back on a weird tangent back to the German for a second, because I'd like to ask Rita, what is a phrase in German which means, because in English we say like somewhere is in the, do you have a phrase for something that's like in the middle of nowhere, like a place that's far away from everywhere, that's, you know, not a real place? It's like, you know, like if I said like I'm lost in the middle of nowhere, we'd say in English. Do you have a phrase for that in German? While you're thinking of that, because in Czech I learnt the other day that in Czech they say, I'm where foxes kiss each other goodnight. That's somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Yes, this is wo sich Fuchs und Hase gute Nacht sagen. But this is more like it's not in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of a forest. It's not nowhere actually.
Can you say that again?
Far away from other places, I guess. Like,
yeah. Can you say that?
Secluded.
Can you say that again? Again, Rita, because I need to write that down.
Yeah. Wo sich
Fuchs
und Hase gute Nacht sagen.
Gute Nacht sagen.
It's a place
Thank
where
you.
the fox and the hare
In Czech it's
Yes.
It's Dvaj Liško Dobro Noc.
So it's because only a fox and a rabbit live there and no one else.
It's interesting that the Czech and German have the same idiom. I think that's very interesting.
You know what? I'm going to relegate all these languages to the questionably quick questions. And I'm just going to catch up with the chat very quickly to say that there's lots of compliments on your hair, Matthew. And so there you go, Drawn Onwards. And hello, Hal. It is lovely to see you. We've got compliments on Matthew's hair.
Thank you very much.
I'm not going to say that is true, although there is kind of an element of truth to that. I get where you're coming from. Hello, Uli. It is lovely to see you. And we will talk about languages in the questionably quick questions bit. So, and then we will talk about playtesting.
Congrats on the Kickstarter, Uli, by the way. I saw that Uli has a what I expect is a made-up profession in Tharos that is very close to my real profession. So I think it was, I can't remember what it was called. It was like a crystallographist or something. and I'm actually a crystallographer.
All right.
So
Uli,
imitated real life.
Yeah. Since Uli is here, we need to talk, Uli. We've got some possible game collaborations to talk about.
Recent
So,
highlights.
Is this what this stream is? Just like
Yeah.
rounding up
Recent
people? Like I need
highlights.
to
Recent highlights. Play games and other delights. Recent highlights. Come on, everybody. Let's get this show on track. What are some of your recent highlights? What have you been doing? I did manage to colour in the bottom row because I said that I was going to do some art for the L deck every other day. I didn't have very much energy at all. I didn't draw anything, but I just coloured in the bottom row. These are my letters so far. What else? I did do the things that I said I would do every other day. I did floss my teeth. I did, do like the bare minimum, like 9 push-ups, just to do some other exercise. And that was, even though I was feeling totally exhausted. Also, I was reaching out to people saying, hey, please come on my 300th show, and getting so many people saying, yeah, we'll come on. And then I'm really excited about it, having like, you know, people coming on throughout the day. So hopefully it will be even more epic than episode 200. It feels like every single 100th episode is just going to be more and more epic, until I need to do like a 24-hour stream for episode 500 or something.
Don't go there, Bez. Don't go there.
Anyway, that is my recent highlights. What have been some of your recent highlights? Come on.
Yay! I have to say,
Mark Harris.
I have to say, this weekend, it was the first weekend here in New Munich where the sun was shining and it was warm, and it was the first time we're sitting outside and drinking coffee. So that was very special. And are we talking about what we played or not yet?
Yeah,
Just
you can talk about things that you've played recently. Absolutely.
Okay, so I played a lot, actually. So I played an older game called Dynasties from Hans and Glück. I don't know how where you have to marry. Where you have
Is it
to
not?
marry.
It's only a few years old, right? I think. Is it? Was it? It's only a
By
couple years old, I
Matthias
think.
Kramer? Is that Dynasties by Matthias Kramer?
Yeah. That's
So
that's
there
the
you
game.
go. At least one person knows it.
Yeah.
I will pull it up.
Yes. I played it second times, and it was very nice to play it again. So it was very funny because in this game, it's maybe the theme is not that on time, so you have to marry. But it was very funny because you have your figures and you can go there and marry someone, and now you say, I marry you, Tom, and then you marry me, and then someone else asks, no, please marry me, please. That was very funny because you need to marry in this game, and everybody wants to get married. So and I also played Hashi. A new game from, yes, that's a game. A new game from Jeffrey D. Ellis. And I also played The Dingo Ate the Baby. The game is called that, The Dingo Ate the Baby. So, it's a little bit like push your luck game. So you have to go over a number, like the game, is it called Blackjack, where you can go over the 21?
Oh yeah, Blackjack.
Yeah, Blackjack. And it's a little bit like that, so it's a push your luck a little bit. Yes. And I also played Box of Rocks.
Oh, are you smarter than the Box of Rocks, where you roll them and then you ask a question? And...
Yeah, we were 2 times smarter than the Box of Rocks, so yeah.
So is that 2 out of 2, or is that 2 out of 100?
No. We played it 2 times, and we were 2 times smarter than the Box of Rocks.
Okay.
And I also played Calico, the game with the cat theme. this looks very sweet and nice.
Oh, I've heard so many good things about that.
It's normally, I think it's not really that special, but it's so good. It's a good feeling game because it looks so great, and what you do is okay, and you have to think a little bit what you do, but it looks so good, and then you feel good.
Yeah, I've heard people saying that it could be Spiel des Jahres material for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that special. So the mechanic
gets into the whole thing about innovation versus kind of refinement, I guess, at that point.
Yes. So it looks very nice, and I liked it, but the mechanic wasn't that new. So
lots of games played. That sounds like an awesome. Was that just over the past few days?
In 1 week.
That's pretty good going.
Yeah.
Nice. How about you, Matthew?
Not as many games played, certainly, but it has also been, the weather has been nicer here. We're not that far from Munich in Prague either, so I suspect that it has felt a little bit more like spring after the snow of it's hard to believe that only about a week ago it was all under a thick amount of snow, which is interesting. Yeah, no, gosh, sorry, I'm not really. We watched Broadchurch over the weekend. I know I'm very late to this. If anybody don't know, it's a UK crime series with almost 10 years old now, actually, I think. But it's very, very good. I would certainly recommend it. And a younger Olivia Colman. So if they know from The Favourite or what's it called? Not The Queen. The Netflix show about Queen Elizabeth. The Crown, isn't it? Is the fourth Crown? Anyway, so yeah, would recommend, certainly. Yes, exactly. Mark's got it right too. Yeah, exactly. It's a David Tennant, early Doctor Who. Exactly. It's an interesting. I mean, that's the thing about British television. It's just the same 10 people rearranged in every new series, essentially, probably for about the last 50 years, I imagine. And looking slightly older or younger, but yeah.
But in Germany, it's the same. So I think it's in every country.
I guess it's going to be the nature of any relatively small country, geographic, like in terms of population at least. It's going to have a smaller actor base. It's going to have a lower throughput. So you're just going to see, yeah, makes sense.
I guess you also have a few dominant genres. Well, I don't know what it's like in Germany, but obviously UK, the kind of the moody crime drama genre is pretty well established by now, and you see, but yeah, anyway, so yes, but otherwise not just mainly we were talking about to-do lists before the start of the show, and I've been good at knocking off lots of things, but at the same time that means my days have felt a little bit what's the word, piecemeal, I guess, because you're just sort of going from task to task, but it's sort of that thing.
Well, that's still good times, and yeah, just hello again to Nuria, who I think that's
hey Nuria, yeah,
who popped in, and I said hello very quickly, but a proper hello to Nuria, and it's lovely to see you all. And Alan, what have you been up to? What's been a couple of your highlights?
Well, I've been helping Oscar, my 6-year-old grandson, because we're in a childcare bubble, so I'm allowed to do that. He's been designing games merrily away. Mainly storytelling. Storytelling is the big thing because he's only 6, so he's not hot on mechanics, not yet. In fact, it's more about the story and making sure that he always wins against his sister. Those are the main things. But so we're doing a bit. So he's got a nice little cat game called Catch the Mouse, which he's doing. He's drawn pictures of cats on the cards, and he's got a board, 2-sided board he has, which is quite fun. His school has also got they're doing a massive project for the whole term on castles. Who would have guessed that? For some reason or other, Oscar's parents always delegate that to me. Who'd have guessed it? And attacking castles is one of the things that they're looking at the moment. And there's the school has got a little game they're supposed to make and play about attacking castles, and basically it's a version of battleships. So I'm thinking we can probably do a little bit better than that. So we're going to have a look at that. We've been talking about how to attack castles and how you might do a game of it. So something will come of that. Other than that, which has been great fun, I've been playing a game which this game here, which is called War of the. You can't see much about this. That's northern Spain. It's called War of the Three Sanchos. It's currently being developed by Dave Mortimer. It's probably going to be the next one in our Pocket campaign series, and that's great fun. It's slightly asymmetric 1 to 3 player, and we're looking at the solo game at the moment. So that's been great fun. I've got a physical copy of that now, which I've made. So that's ready to play. And Rob has also played that. Yay! Yes,
that sounds awesome.
It is quite nice. I'm very much looking forward to talking to our Spanish friends at Two Tomatoes about this, because War of the Three Sanchos is a very little known in England. I don't know how well it's known in Spain. It happened between 1065 and 1067. When everybody seemed to be called Sancho, which is an interesting thing. Apparently, when Sancho the Great died, and there were 3 Sanchos that all kind of inherited bits of northern Spain and fought to each other, and eventually it kind of ended in stalemate. And guess what? Somebody called Sancho took over. So it seems that Sancho's the common thing. So that's War of the Three Sanchos. And we've also been watching Falling Water on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix. Which is one of these weird mystery, what the hell is going on type series, which seems to come out quite a lot. We're halfway through, so I haven't the foggiest idea what's going on. It's all about dreaming and how people can influence each other's dreams, which is a fun topic, but they seem to pride themselves in concealing everything from the audience about what is actually happening, which I find a bit frustrating.
Sounds good.
That's me. And of course, Kingmaker, but I won't go into that.
And well, hello, Eloy, who randomly says Two Tomato guys are cool. I would, obviously, people wouldn't keep working with them if they weren't cool. So yeah, lots of love, Rob. Thank you to have you here. Thank you for following, Nuria. It's lovely to see you. Rob suggests, why not just build a game of crossbows and catapults? And also that, much like UK TV, board games keep having the same people in them. Half of them apparently have Matthew Dunstan. What's all that about? Stop it, Matthew.
I try. Sorry.
Sate is not doing anything productive. The migraine is finally gone. Lots of love, and that seems really appropriate. Taking a day off, and congratulations on the things that I won't. Alec Aquasulis won a playtest game of Alan's new version of Kingmaker, so you didn't have to bring it up, Alan. There you go.
Excellent.
Someone
Thank you.
else without ever controlling royal peace.
That may have been an alliance then. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
And
hello, Javier. You're just in time for the questionably quick questions, and I will. I will allow this to be asked just now. What was the name again of that show?
It's called Falling Water.
Falling Water. Yeah. There we go. And so, yeah, let's talk about. Actually, let me move these bits about. Let's go into the questionably quick questions. Where exactly are you? What time is it? It is UK 10:24. Where are you?
Hi, I'm near Munich, and it's 11:24.
Okay.
It's also 11:24 here in Prague.
It's 10:24 here in Warboys in England,
which is also in the UK. There we go.
There we go.
So it's like the split, looking down on you.
I wonder if I wonder if Rita and I are about the same distance from each other as you and Alan are almost.
Oh, you're quite, but Prague's not that far from Munich.
That's
I see what you
true,
mean.
that's true.
Between us and me and Bez, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, we had a question much earlier in chat. Robert asks Rita. Rita seems the best person to ask this. Lots of languages have an equivalent for not my cup of tea, meaning something that is not to one's own taste. Is there a German equivalent to this, Rita? So we're having a wee bit of a ponder.
I have to say I have a sentence for what Matthew asked me. So it was in the middle of nowhere, and in German we would say am Arsch der Welt. So it's not that friendly, like in the middle of nowhere. It's on the ass of the world.
Oh yes, there's phrases in English like that as well. Like you're
okay. So yeah,
and
and
the arse end of the world.
Yeah, and for the other, I think what can the chat help me, please? So
apparently, Xate's already gave the answer, but I'm struggling to find it now. Yeah,
Yes, das ist nicht.
Heute also streamen wir wieder auf.
Nee, das ist nicht so meins. Ja, aber das ist jetzt kein.
Das ist nicht so meins.
This is not a. This is a normal sentence, so that's not my fault. That's not my type of whatever. So it's a normal sentence.
Okay, there you go. So apparently in Ukraine they say not all felt tips smell and taste the same. That's what they say. And in Danish, it's where crows turn around, means in the middle of nowhere. And so, I mean, you say that Germans don't do poetic language, but I thought that when the fox and the hare say good night, I thought that was very poetic. You know, if no one has any questionably quick questions, then I'm just going to move on. And let me ask.
But now we'll be on track. Bez.
And I've moved a brilliant thing to this section so we can say, why is playtesting brilliant? Brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant? Now, I won't hear anything bad about playtesting. I'm looking at you, Matthew. You know, with your prototyping, not liking prototyping, we're just talking about why it's brilliant. If you can't come up with a reason, just say pass. I'm going to say it's brilliant because you've got that moment, you've made a thing, and then it's that free son of thinking, what will people think? Will people enjoy it? And it's like that little bit of excitement, and then he puts it on in front of people, and then you have that excitement. That's why I think it's a brilliant thing. Rita, why is playtesting a brilliant thing?
A brilliant thing is because maybe you get problems where no problems were before. And so because yeah, because so
but you need problems in life.
I need problems in life. Yes. No, because when my playtesters played, they played especially, and they play for a special strategic. So and they want to see how it works, and that was something I didn't think about before. So there you can find problems and then solutions, of course.
Okay. Matthew.
Pass. No, not pass. my favorite thing about playtesting is that moment when you realize you don't have to playtest anymore. No. No. Well, I mean, that's partly a joke, but I think that for me the most positive thing is the feeling of a game not being finished, but at least being at a point where it can move on to a different stage of the process. I think that's the best part of playtesting, when you realize something is working, because that's the time when you actually get to prove it. I think.
I like it.
Yeah, more than anything.
Alan.
I'll pass.
Really? Okay.
We can't
Yeah,
have two contrarians.
Yeah,
in
we
this
can.
chat.
We can. I think we should all be contrarian, really. I mean, yes. I mean, why is it? The thing about playtesting is you just want the game to work first time perfectly. Come on, we all want that, don't we? We know it's not going to happen. So I suppose playtesting tells us that we're not as brilliant as we might be.
I mean, it's good to be humble for sure.
Yes,
I'm going to say that that's a
yeah. Okay,
brilliant thing.
that's a brilliant thing. It makes us a bit more humble. Yes, indeed. Yes.
So yeah, that is a brilliant thing. I mean, I noticed that we didn't really get into the utilitarian form of, okay, this is brilliant because it gives us information and it helps guide us towards what we need to change and that iteration. It's just like, hey, we've got the excitement, we're creating problems, we're enjoying the progress, and we're staying humble. It's very big, deep philosophical viewpoints. I like it. And of course, we are now officially on topic, but feel free to comment, ask questions, fun like, follow, all that stuff.
Could I add something to my comment? I think the brilliant thing about playtesting is it shows the amazing individuality of each person, because there are people who are going to come up with things which you had never in a million years thought of. You would never have thought of it in a million years, and they'll come up with something like, somebody will come up with an interpretation of a rule that when 50 other people look at it, think it's absolutely crystal clear, and somebody will say, but what about this interpretation? And you think, more or less, you know, that's I think it's the individuality of people's brains that is the brilliant thing that it shows.
Oh, this is so poetic.
What Robert's thing, the moment someone suggests variable player powers, your game is done. I like that. And I like this wee interchange. Hey Robert, have you added variable player powers yet? My work is now done. Alex comes from a very similar place to Rita. The brilliant thing about playtesting is that it makes the weird thing that was in my brain into the weird thing that's definitely broken. And now I have something to fix. So yeah, people just want problems. I mean, you're coming from a puzzle solving point of view. I mean, making a game is kind of like solving a puzzle in many ways. And Sate teases, the brilliant thing about playtesting is getting to tell Aqua all the things that are broken and need fixing. But yeah.
So I think another interesting point is that when you design a game, and sometimes you feel that something isn't correct or could be a problem, and in mostly of my playtesting groups, it's getting real. So playtesting is showing what we feel inside, what we might feel that is not correct, but won't see it. So I think it's a lot of, I won't see it, and it's okay, but then you playtest it, and then the truth comes out.
Yeah, you definitely need to try and get to the truth. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's about a way to get to the reality of a situation, because when it's in your mind, it's just this vague thing. You've got this model in your own mind, but once it's in front of people, you see the reality. You see how it's going to actually be interacted with. I'm going to go back to Robert's question right when we started, which I think there's two ways to interpret this. Robert might be asking when is a good time to playtest, and Robert might also be asking specifically how to playtest a game that has a lot of secrecy and bluffing. Is that something that you can do against yourself? Can you solo test a game with a lot of secrecy and bluffing, or can you only really do it with other people? What's your thoughts, Rita?
So playtest very early, so it depends on the playtest group. So I think if you have a playtest group which is okay with that you playtest a game very early, so it's good. But if you have a group which is not very into playtesting, they might don't understand it, and so it gives us not the solutions we want to have. So I think a big thing is it depends on the playtesting group. And what was the question?
I think the question is basically, how do you test a secrecy or bluffing game? Can you do that solo tested? Let's come back to you and let's move on to Matthew if you've got any idea in your head as an answer to this.
I mean, I think it depends. Everything depends. There's a difference between the kind of the structure of a game and the sort of, I guess, the feeling or the emotions or the, there's a difference between like how the game functions and how it feels to play, I would say. And obviously playtesting can sort of be answering questions on either of those things. So I'd sort of say early on, I think you can actually playtest those kind of any game probably realistically solo. I mean, yes, you're going to miss some element of what it feels to play that because you can't bluff yourself. But yeah, there's a lot of things that even in a bluffing game in terms of the structure that is worth testing. Assuming that is fine, and you're asking, can you test the bluffing? I'd say definitely not, because I think, and I don't think you actually want to. I mean, that's as Alan said, with the kind of variety of opinions. I think, especially any kind of social-esque, mechanisms, like deduction, bluff, all these sort of things. I think they're even more variable in terms of how people interpret that and interact with that. And I think it's a lot harder to imagine that without actually, getting the straight from the horse's mouth with other people playtesting the game. At least that's what I thought. Although I have to admit, this style of game is pretty far outside of my wheelhouse, so I don't actually have a lot of experience personally.
Yeah, I agree with Matthew on that one. It's possible. It's certainly possible if you're designing a game with a lot of bluffing and secrecy in it, you can test the kind of mechanics with yourself. One way to do that is to literally, what I have done before is to actually write down what each of my bifurcated players' strategy is going to be. Write it down. So, and then when you take the position of that other player, you can try and think yourself into that mindset and try to forget what you know about the rest of the game. But that's incredibly difficult, and that's only a very basic level of how you can do the interaction. You need to have other players. I mean, interestingly, one of the things I was going to mention later on was about professional wargaming, and professional wargaming involves a lot of secrecy, because you generally in a professional war game don't know much about what the enemy's intentions are, which is kind of the point of the game. And one of the weaknesses of professional wargaming used to be that they didn't used to do much playtesting, very often because they're quite big games and complex games. And very often they couldn't get people together to playtest. But one of the strictures that Peter Perler says in his book for professional wargaming is you really need to take a leaf out of hobby games industry and playtest more, because you need to have that sampling of how people will react in those situations where you're bluffing, where there isn't complete knowledge. You need to have that, otherwise you can't really tell if the game's going to work. And I think that's important, and you need to do that fairly early. Otherwise, you could find yourself going in the wrong direction, I think. So having some other group of people that are prepared to do it is quite important for a game which is based on secrecy and bluff. I would do that fairly early, as long as it's not too complex.
So, I mean, Robert did have a clarification that when it said for a question for when it's good, Robert just meant a question for when it's good to answer. So the question was entirely down to, can you solo playtest a game with secrecy and bluffing? So Rita, knowing that, do you have any quick answers before we move on?
No.
Okay. I would just mirror what other people have said, that I have playtested games solo with hidden information. You can't do very much in terms of, is this game fun or does this game work well? But you can sort of test, does it work at all? Like, if I'm passing cards between players, are those numbers in the right ballpark? So it's worth kind of testing that part of it for sure. But I would agree with everyone who said, yeah, you really need to get those other people even more so than in a perfect information. The more hidden information, I think, the more social party-like it is, the harder a time you're going to have solo testing it. And yeah. Let me move on and ask a difficult question, which is, are some playtesters better than others? Do you think that I mean, for me, I think the short answer is yes, I'm going to put it out there, but yeah, it's like, who are these better playtesters? And Matthew, what's your opinion?
Yeah, that's...
It's sad because it feels like very much a value judgment, and I'm not going to say that it's not great to have everyone playtest the thing, because for sure you get some degree of information from anyone, but
I think you want... It's not that I think, yeah, there's a contextual point that's missing there. I think there are playtesters are better at different times than others. I'm not sure if you would say that in a vacuum, playtester X is always better than playtester Y, but I think for me personally, earlier on, I like playtesting with other designers. It lets you skip past a lot of... My prototypes are often very rough. Other designers are kind of usually more forgiving of that, although, you know, other playtesters are. I guess it's playtesters are used to that early stage of the process, however that is. And as you go on later on, you often want to test further outside of that sphere. Although, to be honest, I'm quite happy if the publisher is doing that mainly. You know, I'm not... I'm not really one of these people who likes, you know, going to a convention and testing with random people. It's never been... I don't know, for whatever reason, it's not how I get... I don't know, it doesn't help me get more information as much as some quality testing with playtesters I know in terms of what their preferences are and what their kind of view on games are. I sort of do better with that contextual information. But I wouldn't say there's I think every playtester can offer something in a particular instance, in the right instance. But
that makes sense, being mindful of that context, and everything's relative. Alan?
My short answer is yes, some playtesters definitely are better in the sense of more useful than others. So I'm going to be a bit oppositional to that one, because the worst playtester is somebody who plays the game, doesn't engage, and doesn't give you any useful feedback, which can happen and can happen quite a lot. But I mean, for example, I think one of the games I designed, I can't remember what it was, I kind of put a note on BGG to say, can I have some people who might playtest the game? And I sent out a few copies of the game to people who said, yeah, we'll do this. Yeah. But with effectively no contract, not formal contract, but no actual real agreement about what I was expecting, what they were expecting, etc. And it was like talking to the void. So these people had copies of the game. Some of them may even have played it, but no response. Or you get a response saying, "Thank you very much, that was fun." Now that's just not... You know, it's not helpful at all. Well,
at least they had fun. They could have said they didn't have fun.
That's something. But you don't even know whether they're telling you that was fun because they feel they have to give you some response because you sent them a free game. You know, so. But on a more positive note, I think the best playtesters are those who really engage with what you're trying to do at the appropriate stage. I mean, some of my best playtesters for Kingmaker, for example, are those who... I would say there are two types here. There are those who are very experienced playtesters who know how to do it, and you can ask them to test certain specific things, and they'll go ahead and do that, and they'll give you a nice, frank, very informative response. And quality feedback, if I can put it that way. The second type, which is just as important, are those people who will engage and play the game. They may not necessarily be very experienced, and they will give you good feedback from a kind of neutral, if you like, a neutral viewpoint. They're not designers, they're not developers, they're just players, but they're giving you really good feedback from a pure player perspective. In a sense, what I don't want too much in this is I don't like too much of a crossover between those two types. What I don't like, which I have had quite a lot before, is a person who basically says, "Yeah, I will play the game," who then comes back and says, "I played this game as a playtest, not just to play the game, but to playtest the game." Now, if you've asked somebody to just play the game, have fun, play the game to win as you want, as you'd normally play a game. I don't want somebody then distorting their play and taking decisions that are, because it's a playtest, I'm going to do this. Because that gives you a completely distorted view of how the game is operating. I want somebody who's playing to play the game to win as if it was a fully published final game and do that. If it's a more, I was going to say professional playtester, if it's an experienced playtester who's doing it as kind of a part of development in a way, I can ask them to play a certain strategy, try something out or whatever, and give me feedback on that. But so those two types, which I think are quite important, they certainly have been quite important for me for Kingmaker. I want some people who will play straight, as it were, and just play and then give me feedback. And others, I'd like to look at it and keep an eye on the parts of the development that we've done and see how they work, and maybe try some things out to see if they work, that kind of thing. So that dichotomy between those two types is quite important.
But whether you're getting people to play normally or try something crazy, going back to Matthew's point of it is contextual, the ultimate thing is, and you've now reminded Aquasulis to not do too much of this and to send you some more feedback. The important thing is that you are actually engaging with the game, or at the point where you say, hey, you know what, I just can't bring myself to engage with the game. At least vocalize that and give that sort of feedback.
Yes, if it's feedback which is I don't find this interesting and I can't engage with it, that's very important feedback for any playtester to give. Very valuable.
You have to be willing to do that. Rita, what do you think makes a good playtester, if there's such a thing?
So I would say I have the best playtesters in the world, and I love you so much. So yeah, don't forget, you always have to be friendly to your playtesters. This is very important. So I think there are 3 types of playtesters. So the one type is especially people who are new in the play testing business, and they play it and they say, yes, it's good, yes I like it. So that's what Alan said. So okay, and now so this is I think this is the worst case, where you played it and maybe you can see how they act and something like that. So it's better to play test with this group than don't play test at all. But I think this is the worst group. The second group is the best group because they play test it and they see how problems were and maybe get some solutions for that and so on. And then there is the third group, and this is a little bit problematic because these are very experienced playtesters, but they can't see when a game is finished. So they playtest it, and they always said, oh, we could this, and now we could this, and you can make this, and you can make this. And they want to change. They give you a feedback to change the game.
Yeah, sometimes you need to think, is this feedback because it's something missing from the game?
Yes,
or is
yes.
it just because the person felt like they have to give feedback?
Yes, and this is something you have to find out for yourself. So, but there are some people that they always want to change a game. You play test it, and they never say it's a great game. I think it's finished, and I won't change something I won't change something. So, yeah. But I also have to say, for a party game, I might go for the first group, because when the rules are too easy, and some experienced playtesters look at the game and say, this is too easy. It can't be the game because it's too easy. And so I always watch for party games for group number 1. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You need to get to know your playtesters. And I think that, I mean, with the Playtest UK feedback form, when it says what kind of games you actually enjoy, there is so much value in that I didn't really appreciate at the start of it. Because if someone doesn't like party games at all and you're making a party game, I'm not going to say totally ignore what they're saying, but it might not have as much value as someone who is in the field of party games. And if you make it better for someone who likes war games, for example, you might be actually making your party game worse for its intended audience. So I think there's a lot of truth to what Alex has said. And Javier's got some really interesting points. As a playtester, on the other side, you must know yourself and be honest about it. Communicate it to the designer. For example, I can give a general feedback of whether or not I enjoyed the game and say which parts I liked or not, but it's very hard for me to pinpoint specific points that need adjusting or suggesting alternative mechanisms or scoring, etc., and tell it to the designer. And I would argue, personally, that it feels like, for me, as you become more experienced as a designer, it's up to the designer to say, okay, this is the person's personal feedback. This is what they think. All I want you to do is tell me what you thought. What kinds of experience did you have? And I'm going to, because I know you well enough to understand what you like and what you don't like, and then I'm going to give it to a few people. And if I understand those people enough, understanding the people, and maybe this goes back to what you said, Matthew, of not wanting to playtest with random people in a convention, because let's look at data. You've got 2 types of data, qualitative and quantitative. And if it's qualitative, well, you better know the person. Otherwise, what's the point? If someone says, well, I like this, well, you need to know the context. Whereas if it's quantitative, if you want to know, well, how much do people on average think that this game is worth? How much would people be willing to buy it? Well, that kind of question, you need like tens or even hundreds of people to answer before you can get any useful feedback. And so, yeah, anything else you want to say on all of that? Alan, go ahead.
To address Javier's second point, really, yeah, as a designer, I don't need a playtest to suggest alternative mechanics or to suggest certain specific points that need adjusting. I just need the feedback. I don't mind if people want to give some suggestions about alternatives, because that's always adding to the pool of ideas. But I need them to say which bit. What I need them to say what happened and what they felt. That's important. And then, as a designer, if I can usually come up with some form of solution to that, which may be completely different from the playtester's suggested solution. And it's the designer's responsibility or developer's responsibility to come up with those solutions, particularly because the designer and developer will know how things link together in the game, and the playtesters may not. So if you give me some really good feedback and suggest an alternative solution, don't necessarily expect me to put your solution in. I probably put something which addresses, I should be putting something in that addresses the point if I think it's valid. And there is sometimes with some playtesters, there might be an expectation that their solution is, you know, going to be used. That's not necessarily the case. So it's the comments. It's, I think, as Matthew said, it's their feelings and their comment about what they thought when they were playing that's important, not identifying solutions.
I mean, you hear it sort of tossed around. I'm not sure where it came from originally, this sort of quote or idea, but, you know, somebody says that playtesting is about identifying problems, not proposing solutions. And that, yeah, which is kind of exactly what Alan said. And also, Brett would say a lot in the Cambridge playtest group often that, especially when you playtest, especially with other designers or people who are working on games, playtesters are often going to suggest things towards the game that they would design. You know, like that you know, they've been presented the game. It's like, where would you go with the game? But ultimately, of course, that's not really what you're trying to do, because the designers have got to work out where they want to take the game. But yeah, I think finding, you know, I think some emotional feedback is obviously very important, and trying to work out where are the problems, you know, even if you don't know how to fix them.
Rita, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. So let me ask, what makes a good playtest? We've touched on lots of this, but when do you come away from a playtest feeling like, oh, that was a great playtest? I mean, for me, it feels like if I want to nail down into it, it's just having a clear direction of where to go. Alan, anything more than that?
I think it depends on the stage you're at. If it's an early playtest, I think a good playtest is one where you get a lot of positive and critical feedback that enables you to go in the direction, in a useful direction. That's really important. And early on, particularly, well, I suppose at any point, if the game breaks, that is a good playtest. I had a game which I designed a while ago called Snack Attack, and I'd done quite a lot of work, and I made it's a fairly complex game. I made a good prototype, played it a few times kind of solo, played it a few times with a couple of groups, and it seemed to be fine. Then we had a very big major playtest, and it absolutely thoroughly broke at that point, because somebody played what should have been an obvious strategy in a way, and it just fell apart. And that was incredibly useful, because I thought at that point, well, that kind of undermines the whole game system. So that was one which I put on the shelf and did something else. So having it break, particularly really early, is a very useful playtest, because it means that you don't waste time. So fail fast, I think, is what that's called usually. So even though you could call that a negative playtest, it's not actually. It's a very positive playtest, because it says, no, that wasn't a good idea after all. Let's do something else. And that's always a good lesson to learn. Because we're never short of stuff to, I think we're never short of stuff to playtest. Are any of us short of stuff to playtest? I don't think so.
I mean, in this format, it's a bit more trickier to come up with games that I'm willing to playtest, is the truth. When I've kind of decided for myself, you know what, I'm not going to go down the tabletop simulator route. I guess that's yeah, we probably should touch upon digital stuff later on, but
yeah, later on probably. Yeah. So that's my view. A good playtest is one that breaks the game and tells you something really, really, really important. But in the late stage, a good playtest. I mean, I had a really good Kingmaker playtest the other day, which was it was quite a long game. It was on Tabletopia, so you know it's not going to be short. Kingmaker on Tabletopia, but it went the distance, and it was able to show that a very important part of Kingmaker is if somebody gets hit early on, is there time in the game for them to come back and recover their position, you know, and still have a good game? And the answer was yes. that is possible. That's how we wanted the game to work, to be able to come back and still have a good game, even if you got hit early on. So something that reassures you that a major part of the design or development does actually work as intended is really useful, very useful. Yeah.
I have two points for what is a good playtest. So my first point is I always like it when I don't need to play the game with my playtesters. So when I'm sitting beside the table and just watch. So this is very difficult in Corona times because the groups are not that big, and so mostly I had to play it with the testers. But I think you get the best feedback when the testers play it and you don't. So it's when you play it with the testers, you always want to say something about the games and give tips or something like that. So I think, or is it just me? I don't know. So the best thing is when I'm beside the table and just watch and see how it works. And the second point is when I play test it and I see, okay, maybe there are a few things that doesn't work so far, but the idea is good and I should go on with that idea. Yes.
So it definitely feels like it's the two sides when it's clear information is what we're looking for, whether it's a clear problem or reassurance that something actually works. Do you have anything to add to that, Matthew, really?
I mean, I think, you can't separate we're not robots, right? So I think there's also a sort of a psychological or sort of a mental side to it in that, a playtest in some way can be kind of an exhausting experience because you're kind of constantly on the lookout for things, and you're trying, not only you're thinking maybe about the game, you're thinking about the people playing it, you're doing a lot more thinking than you would, just if you were sitting down to play a game. And I think for me, what makes a good playtest is just a lot to be how I feel at the end of it. And it doesn't necessarily fall into, you can feel good for different reasons, as Alan and Rita have both said, getting clear information can feel very good because you feel like you're making progress with the design. Although, of course, sometimes that can have the opposite effect. If the game's really not working, you can just feel frustrated, or if you don't know where you're going. And I think there's a lot more. I'd say early on that it was sort of interesting corollary to talk about playtesters who say like the game is fine, and that you don't want that kind of information. But I think that it can happen on the designer side as well, and that can be really hard because you play a game and you're like, oh, it's fine, like it didn't break, it's not terrible. Like, is it even worth continuing on with this kind of completely fine game or not? And I think actually though that's the kind of the really hard playtest. I think in some ways it's not that something absolutely aberrant happened or something broken, and I think that I guess I think that feeling is much more common, or at least for me, that where you have a very kind of middle of the road playtest and it's just like, oh yeah, it was fine, and when you feel it yourself, then that impacts, because ultimately that's related to feeling good about a playtest is what's your likelihood of wanting to playtest it again, because games only move forward by continually playtesting them, and if you don't feel like doing that, then no matter what your playtesters think or what information you're getting, well, then you're not going to progress with it. So I think for me, if a successful playtest, a good playtest is if I feel like playtesting it again at some point, then that's a good thing.
I
really like that. Sorry, Alan, I'll let you respond.
Yeah. Following off that, I think we've. Is it useful for us to just talk a little bit about the types of playtesting, because we've kind of gone sideways, referring to different types of playtesting in a way. But I'm wondering if it's worth just having a look at what types of different types of playtesting there are, because a good playtest will depend on what type of playtest it is, really, won't it?
I think that's a very good point. And so let's examine that in a minute, I'd like to catch up with chat, who, yeah, there's a lot of mentions of this whole notion of having problems, and that's what we want. And yeah, as Rita said right at the start, Javier says, you shouldn't playtest genres that you won't enjoy because you will be biased and not be engaged. Robert says, I've definitely experienced that, feedback being about the sorts of games they will design. Javier says, I'm always up for playing and playtesting party games, hidden roles, bluffing, polyominoes. I would play long, heavy Euros, but I would never playtest them. And of course, playing is referring to published games, playtesting referring to stuff in develop. And Robert, when, as a playtester, tries to ask a designer, hey, what are you actually trying to design? Which is such a good question. If ideally the designer should have made that obvious. Ideally, it would already be in that ballpark, and kind of teaching that game and pitching it is such a skill that you will need at some point. If you're pitching it to a publisher, you need to say, well, this is a light game. It takes about 1 minute per round, about 10 minutes for the game. It's suitable for very younger people, and it's a light party game or kids game. And if you can't do that, you need to be able to kind of summarize it in order to pitch it to a publisher, or if you're self-publishing it, in order to gain any market traction. So as designers, I think it's important that we are communicating that in some way. And if that's not clear to you as a playtester, I think that's a great question to ask. Nuria says, I've experienced this too. I try to ask about the experience, sensations that designers want to convey during the game and audience they are designing for, and then try to adjust my comments based on that. It's not easy, but I think it's important to do. Getting back to, yeah, we want issues. We don't want features. It's kind of, I'm not going to say, oh, I agree with Alan. If you've suggested, a feature, then great. It's just for the pool of ideas. But also, again, it's down to the designer, because really the designer is doing the work. And let's be honest, let's acknowledge the fact that playtesting is generally a thing that at most you might get a copy of the game and a mention in the rule sheet. You don't get anything else for it. Whereas as a designer, sure, a lot of designers aren't making any income and are doing it purely as a passion project, but a lot of designers are making a living from this and making some sort of income. So then we've got there is a greater responsibility, I would say, on the designer to say, okay, why are they suggesting this feature? What problem is it? What is the reason? And try to do that sort of encouragement. Not encouragements, investigation. Encourage them to give the answers that you're looking for. And Robert says, I've started asking designers what weight the game is, so if they're making a luck-heavy 5-minute cards game, I adjust my feedback. Before we get into the types of playtesting, which I agree is a great point to make, but do you have any comments regarding on what we've just said, Alan?
Yes, I think so. I mean, in a way, there's two basic bits of feedback I think that we're kind of homing in on. One is the feedback of, I like that bit and why you like it. That's key. That's key. The other one is, I don't like that bit and why you don't like it. I mean, if you want to put it kind of in a nutshell, those are things. And obviously, because you have to interpret the meaning of what those words actually mean, it's helpful if you know the playtesters individually. So those are the two bits. If they say, well, obviously, if they say, well, it's all a bit meh, then that's also useful feedback. But I like that bit is a very nice piece of feedback to have, even if it's just stroking your ego a bit. But particularly if it's from a playtester that you know who gives you frank feedback, that's really very helpful. I don't like that bit and why is kind of critical.
So I have to say, I said in the videos before that I worked together with a board game agency called White Castle, and I still do that. because they have great playtesting groups. There are all experienced designers, and they're giving exactly the information you need. And this is very, very helpful.
And Matt, anything you need to say at this point?
No, I think it's been covered pretty well.
Okay, let's cover the different types of playtesting. Alan, would you like to propose, in a nutshell, what you see as the types of playtesting?
Is a list of 8 too long?
Go for it.
Okay.
Just don't dwell on each one too long.
No, just give you the titles. So, first type of playtesting, basic functionality. That's a does it work one. Second one is playtesting while the designer is actually playing as well, because that's a useful experience to have. Observation testing, which Rita has already referred to. So the other players are playing and you're just observing and you're trying not to say anything, which is really hard, but it's very important. Then blind testing, so which isn't quite the same as observation. You're actually giving them the game and saying, right, get on with it and give me the feedback when you're finished. Testing for specific features, which I think we've touched on. And kind of more of a range thing, qualitative testing, which we've mentioned, and quantitative testing, two different things really. And then finally one that, well, and this is a very brief ontology, component testing, which I think I'm finding that really challenging for Kingmaker, because we can only do it online, and that's not adequate. And in my view, that's not adequate. I don't know how other people are doing component testing when you can't sit down face to face with other people, and I'd be interested in people's views on that. But that's my brief list of categories. There probably others.
That makes a lot of sense, and there's going to be a lot of crossover. Something might be okay. Does it work? Are you looking at the entire game, or are you testing for a specific feature? Does this feature even work? And yeah, I think that's a really good list to keep in mind. I'll type it up there. Rita, do you have any? What would you say are your types of playtesting if you had to give a list?
So the first thing I want to find out, does this game make fun? Yeah, is the idea good enough, and does it make fun? Or does it make sense at all? Yeah. And the second thing, I want to see how long does the game take to play, because so normally when I want to create a family game, it shouldn't be longer than 30 to 45 minutes. So this is very important for me. Another important thing is, and this is especially prototype testing with experienced players, is the mechanic new or special enough? So I think this is a very important point, because we have so many games, and every year there are so many new games. And what is the special on the game that people want to buy it, or that the publisher want to take it? So the biggest part I playtest is about balancing. So because I'm not good at in maths, so a few people create maths to work out the balancing. So I can't do that. So I have to playtest it. So yeah, these are, and some other things, what Alan just said, components, and I also play that with experienced designers to maybe find some ideas to make the components cheaper or more attractive or something like that.
Oh, I think
Sorry,
you're
from
asking
the
me.
sounds of it, Javier's question, is component testing something that the designer should take care of, even if you're pitching it to a publisher? And I would have thought,
Yeah.
well, you know, as a designer, you're probably, it's not essential. I mean, certainly Yogi, which used to be called In a Bind, you know, they share, I don't think they share anything in terms of components. I mean, yes, they've got rectangular objects, but in terms of materials, I don't think there's anything that, well, I guess the paper, even the paper that they used for the instructions is completely different. I don't think there's any components that you could say, so actually that's what they did. And I think that that product design is something that the publisher can do. But it should at least be something that works well enough, even if, and Alan's coming from a publisher point of view, but the fact that Rita's doing wee bits of it, I think, speaks volumes that you need to set in the groundwork.
To be fair, though, you've got cards. I mean, they're different. Okay, they're different. In Yogi and a bind, you've got cards, but they are different materials, but they're still cards. I mean, they're recognizably.
That's true, and people have. I heard someone saying that they were going to laminate Yogi, and I said, hey, you do realize that it is literally waterproof already, and you can already play it in the bath.
I was thinking for component testing, for example, for the simple things in Kingmaker, like, because it's quite a big board, but there's quite a lot of locations on it, how big do the tiles need to be to sit on the...
Actually, lots of that can come into it. Like, how many spaces can you fit on a card? How many spaces can you fit on a board that people can reach? How it's kind of user experience, and what are people able to interact with?
The answer is both. Designers and publishers need to do that, I think. And you shouldn't be too. If as a designer, you don't need to be too fixed to your decisions, because the publisher may have a different view, and it may be cost related rather.
So in the first years when I started designing, I didn't think of that. But after a few appointments, I've seen the differences between the publishers. So some publisher is saying, oh, yeah, we can do this or this, and this is cheaper, so we can do this. And some publishers are, oh, what is this? This is too expensive. We can't do this. And then I just said, yes, but you can also use paper. And they can't imagine that. So yeah, and so now I try to focus on that too, to make it easier also for the publisher, so that they have to think a lot.
It's always a question of how, you know, when you're designer of a game, it's you could always put more effort into it, right? I mean, you could always essentially spend more and more time thinking about all these different aspects, and of course you also hope that the publisher is also doing that. But as Rita said, you know, that it's I think it's a personal choice on behalf of the designer as to how much you're going to care. You know, often you put more effort in, you're going to end up with a better product, and you'll be testing it with more things. And I think the points about UI design and usability is very important. You just hope that you're going to get to the right answer, and it doesn't matter who, or the best answer, or a best answer, and it doesn't matter who it comes from. It might come from the publisher, it might come from the designer. Of course, as a designer, you think that you're getting a better chance the more you put into it, but yeah, there's always a balance of how much you can pour into that process, and where are you going to have like the best use of your time or impact. I mean, it's a bit outside playtesting, I think.
No, I think that what you say, remembering that we are not robots and that we can only do so much, you could always say, yeah, if you spent another year, if you spent twice as long on this game, yeah, you might always be able to make it a little bit better. I mean, come on, Matthew, why aren't you spending twice as long on your games and making half as many games and half? But obviously that's not realistic for a variety of reasons.
No, I think I think it's interesting about playtesting that my own, I have been a bit glib before, but I guess for me playtesting isn't that enjoyable ultimately. You know, it's not the best part of game design for me. So, you know, it's obviously a means to an end. You have to do it, but I'm not doing it for the sake of doing it. I'm not doing it for necessarily the enjoyment. So I'm just trying to get to a point where I feel like and you can show it to a publisher, and I think there's, you know, I don't know, we'll probably talk about later that kind of the next step, but there's always a kind of a gray area, I think, where a very common question is like, you know, should I keep playtesting my game? Is it ready? You know, when does it finish? And with, you know, it's been raised already a little bit on the stream. And that is not a clear answer. You know, again, it's very contextual, and yeah, that impacts upon, you know, if a game is going to be finished or if it's going to be published or not. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, as a designer and publisher, which I think is increasingly, I was going to say, I think it might be increasingly rare nowadays. I don't know. It's a slightly different approach, because I've always got in the back of my mind, particularly if it's one like our Pocket Campaigns one, I'm really interested in what the components will end up looking like, and what's the flexibility that we can have in terms of making things more cost effective. And that's always going to be a kind of influence on my thoughts on how the game is being designed and developed. It's a major part of what I'm thinking about. If it's something which we're not going to publish ourselves, or we're going to go in partnership with, it's possibly slightly different.
And hello, Ian, who lives just a few miles away. It's lovely to see you. And yeah, we've got lots of questions. I think that to address what Matthew said, in terms of when do you know that that's enough playtesting, I think we'll address that somewhat in our next discussion, which is all about iteration. And you know what? If we end up having to do one of these twice, then so be it, frankly. If we have to do playtesting again, or I might suggest that once this is all done, we break group or shift, we'll talk about it, we'll get through everything. Now, Matthew, I wanted to ask you specifically, do you have any other types of playtesting beyond what Alan and Rita have said? Because I don't think I do. Do you?
There's I guess I'm not sure if it's a completely different type. I guess I make a lot of narrative games now. So you do have also a different style of playtest where, yeah, you really are trying to capture and get the most out of a playtest, knowing that you can't ever playtest with that group again, or at least it won't be very useful. And yeah, you do. I think you approach it a little bit differently in terms of, you know, you're not. Often it's not about whether the game is working functionally, because it will function, but it's such a personal thing. And it's interesting how you talked about sort of quantitative versus qualitative data. I mean, you're trying to collect essentially qualitative thoughts on sort of a quantitative scale, you know, because the way different people approach puzzles or joining pieces of a narrative together is so complex. And the only way that you really can, I think, playtest or develop those games is kind of in aggregate, because in any specific playtest, one person might be like, oh, I couldn't get that riddle, like that completely stumped me, or you know, or that narrative made no sense to me, and it can feel completely imbalanced or broken in that specific example. But then overall, you might say, okay, that's 5% of people, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, I would sort of almost call it the kind of like the survey or the data gathering playtest, almost, in that you're just trying to get people to experience the game as much as possible. You're not really worried about the game changing from test to test. You're just trying. It's like user testing or something, you know, or how they do with TV shows, right, where you have test.
I mean, at that point, I guess it's really all about the quantitative testing.
Yeah, it's
in the aggregates, as you said.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, it's nice because you're not. Yeah, you're kind of going into that in a different way as the designer, I guess, is the point. You're not trying to necessarily monitor exactly how the game is functioning, but how people actually cognitively thinking about things, and how do they, you know, because that's even it's just a completely different style of feedback. You know, how hard did you find this sort of abstract problem, you know, sort of thing.
Is that a case, Matthew, where you can have something, one of those narrative style games, where maybe somebody doesn't get it at all for some reason or other, but you don't really mind? That's not necessarily indicating that it's broken, is it? Because they just
no. I mean, sometimes it's about working. What are the affordances that you're going to build into the system? So that might tell you, okay, I need to make sure that I have like a good hint system, or I need to make sure that those people are going to get stuck on this. Yeah, I think you have to differentiate between things that, yeah, because there could also be like in terms a playtest can still be fine if someone goes, I was completely stuck and I got the solution, and that makes sense, and they can still sometimes feel satisfied with that actually, because they're like, oh, you know, like if you get to the end of Sherlock Holmes, for example, and you miss something, but then in that solution you're like, oh, okay, I see how that works, that makes sense. You know, that's also kind of part of the experience, maybe not, because if you kind of get everything, sometimes that actually can take away a little bit. You can feel it's too easy, or you haven't. So yeah, you do have to sift between the things that are like, is this coming up often enough that it's going to just cause people to not be able to experience the whole thing?
Because one of the things I was wondering is how Michael Fox playtested Holding On. I don't know if you Holding On is a
The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr.
And it was noticeable when it came out. There was a lot of criticism from people who basically said, "Well, we've played the first two scenarios, and the whole game is entirely the same all the way through." And you think, but you've only played like not even a quarter of it. You've only played like a tenth of it so far, and you're making a conclusion about a narrative game where you have to play the whole thing to know what the narrative is, and you're dismissing it immediately after you've played it once or twice, which is nuts. Now, it's quite possible that he came up, that there would have been people who said that possibly when they did the playtesting, but you have to kind of, because the whole game is based on the idea that you will go further. And if you've got people who only want to play it once and that's it, then they're not in, it's not, that's the wrong target audience. And you probably have to, I guess, accept that. Is that how you would do that?
Well, I think it's, I mean, I have to admit, I haven't made too many games which are, you know, they're more sort of one and done experiences. But yeah, I guess it's a difficult thing, because with a playtest group, if you're getting them to go through the whole legacy campaign, they're not really necessarily a good example of sort of like a random person from the street buying that game, right? You're kind of invested by that point. I think it's very hard to have a sort of a neutral thing, and of course that runs into the problem with nowadays with games. Everyone wants to play everything sort of once, or you know, you'll have very quick opinions. So I think that's just more difficulties wrapped up with that style of game. I'm not sure how much it reflects on the playtesting necessarily. I think that seems to just fit more into how do those games, are they kind of like reacted to in the market sort of thing.
I mean, you know what? It might be fun to kind of chat about more narrative style games and get a bit more in depth with them another time. I think that this whole show is going to have to be a bit of an overview. And hello, Nicholas. So we've got a quote from Alex, who's an established designer, said they used to try and finally balance their games before pitching it, and they would often be published as is. But now there's a lot more development by the publisher, so the designer gets their designs now to about 80% finished. I mean, I heard this second part from Knizia. I don't know if Knizia said the whole thing or if I'm misattributing it, but for sure I've heard Knizia saying that they deliberately will not finish it so that the publisher is kind of putting more on it imprint. But I think also if you're Knizia, where you're getting more than a game a week out, which is kind of insane, A, you can't do that final 20%, and B, the fact that the publisher is putting their own stamp on it means that even though two games might have been very similar as submitted, at least they get tweaked and they become a slight bit more different. Because I remember maybe 10 years ago, you might say, wait a minute, this game from this publisher and this game from this publisher, which are apparently completely different games, aren't they almost exactly the same? Whereas now, I hope that's not me bad-mouthing Knizia too much, because for sure, like, Knizia is blooming amazing, let's say. But anyway, and
I just add just one thing to that. I think you have to, there's something missing. The context of that is also the publisher that you're working with. Yes. I definitely know some publishers who have a very low opinion of designers who don't develop their games enough to the point, and they feel like that they're, you know, that's a negative point. And there are other publishers, who are very appreciative of be able to put something into the game. So I think you have to really think about. I think it's as much the publisher as the designer how they approach this. I think that's it.
So let's move towards a bit more of a rapid fire round. So feel free to say pass or whatever. Javier, for casual games, should you playtest with gamers as much as with non-gamers? What are the pros and cons of each group? For the first part, I'm going to say, no, you don't need to test with gamers. Just test it with the people in the pub if you're able to do that in a normal setting, because those are the people who actually will play the game and you will get the feedback from those people. Alan?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Yeah, absolutely.
Rita?
So when you play with non-gamers, maybe they okay, from the start, I playtest a game with non-players, and it was a flippin' ride, and it had gain and wood. Gain wood and so the normal ingredients in it, and I playtested it, and the comment was, "Oh, I liked it. It's a little bit like Catan because it has the same ingredients." So this is when you play with non-players, they don't have the experience to give good information to you, and maybe they are not, I don't know the English word, die trauen sich nicht. Can somebody just help in the chat? They don't like to hurt you, so they don't give good feedback. So the best feedback is when someone just straight says what he thinks, and maybe you don't want to hear it because you have to work on it again. But yeah, so this is when you playtest it, when you playtest games for other designers, you also have to think that. So I playtest a game with a new designer. It was his first game, and my feedback was very, very bad. And I said, this was unbalanced, this was that, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And he didn't cry, but he was very disappointed. So maybe that is what you do have in mind when you give feedback to a new designer.
That's a really good point about, you might want to check in with someone who's got some awareness of the market to see how does this fit? Is this even an original? And for sure, playing it with other designers, even if those designers, their emotional feedback might not be as relevant to some degree, A, a good designer will be able to put them in the shoes of someone else and couch that, but B, a designer will hopefully know, hey, this game is almost exactly the same as that other game. Check out that other game and either distance yourself from it or don't bother with this game. Matthew?
I don't think I have much to add on this particular point.
Okay. So the next question was, how about accessibility? So I guess you'll need to wait for a pre-production copy to playtest again to check issues like color blindness, etc. And yeah, for sure, color ink, that's something that you need to ideally get the final color of ink, but you can, I mean, I think it's Susan McKinley Ross who made Quirkle, who's gone on record as saying, hey, a lot of publishers lack imagination. So I made sure that my components were pretty much what I ideally wanted for the game. So I had big chunky components. If I'd gone in with little bits of cardboard, maybe they would have done little bits of cardboard, but I had big chunky components and they said, oh, this looks really good, let me do this. And so you can sort of start thinking about this stuff, even though there's limitations. But Alan, tell us what you think about testing for accessibility.
Yeah, well, I think you need to do it. I think you need to be aware of this as a designer. The classic ones that we have a friend of ours who designs games, and sometimes it would be basic things like maybe a color on the board which is supposed to match a color on a card, even in your prototype, has to match more or less. Otherwise, it becomes more difficult to play the game. That's the thing. So I think accessibility is part of what we need to do. And yes, the publisher will need to check it, fully. But I think as designers, we have to be aware of it. Maybe we don't have to be quite so rigorous as the publisher, but we do have to. We will always check when we're designing a game. We will always check. We have several playtest groups that have got colorblind players in them, so we're always able to test it. So we do as a matter of course we would do that anyway, because otherwise during playtesting people just comment all the time about that kind of issue. They'll just keep commenting on those things whenever they spot them. So yes, be aware of those and correct them as you go along if you can, I would say.
And for sure, the playtest itself should be accessible. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to splash out on proper cards. I mean, if you use literally bits of paper rather than even blank cards, hey, it's more environmentally friendly and that's fine. But if there's a dexterity component, well, you really need to use blank cards. You know what I'm saying? It should be fit for purpose for the playtest.
I mean, that's our basic problem with online testing now, isn't it? That's that. I mean, it's a fundamental.
Yeah, it's not fit for purpose.
It's not fit for purpose. Purpose is the only thing we've got. So yeah.
Rita, do you have anything to say about testing for accessibility?
Yes, this is something. So whenever you have the chance to playtest your game, so when you have when the game is already at the publisher, and whenever you have the chance to playtest the game before it is printed, you should do that and look at what he just says. So accessibility and so on. So I think this is very important for not for the prototype you make, but for the end product, because I can show it to the publisher and have the best colors it has, but the publisher said, oh, we don't like these colors, we change it in other colors, and don't have that things in mind. What do you have, what you did have in mind? So yeah, this is something for the end product, I think.
Matthew, anything about accessibility?
Yeah, sorry. I think I'm sure it's been said before. There is a great value, especially on the sort of. I mean, I'm not a publisher, so but there's a great value when the publisher makes the effort to, playtest with things. And I mean, one designer I know who talks about, like Bruno Catala, puts a lot of stuff online where he shows that he's, whenever he gets new art or new components that, like you'll get sent a file, which is like, this is what we think the cards are going to look like. And he'll actually print it out himself and again, like play it just to see what it feels like. Because I think there are a lot of things you can't imagine what they are until you actually try it. Looking at something on the screen is different, and you'll think of things when you're just playing the game. You realize, oh, actually this piece doesn't fit in here or something, or that's why you really need to test with the final thing as much as possible.
And Nuria playtests with a colorblind designer, so basically the prototypes have to be accessible. And so yeah, a lot of people saying, hey, we need to start this as soon as we can. Now, going back to the question of maybe non-gamers not giving enough feedback, I think this is a great tip, just in case you're watching this after the fact or you're watching this not on Twitch. I just wanted to flag up Alex saying, if people don't give enough feedback, I usually ask them, how would you make this game better? I think that's a great approach to take, kind of, because people are, hey, this game is good, I don't want to offend you. Well, how would you make it even better? yeah, I know it's good. And yeah, Rob Harper learnt a lot by testing with Fabio Loppiano, designer of Calimala and Ragusa and some other games, is colorblind. So for just the context to explain that. Now, one other question from the audience, which was about the biggest challenge that you've had when playtesting. If I could swap the order slightly. So, yeah, I'm trying to find that. Matthew, can you think of the biggest challenge that you've ever had whilst playtesting?
I mean, I can think of the challenge I've had when I've been a playtester, but as the designer, oh gosh,
Tell me both, because I mean, as a playtester, you can learn. Actually, I'm just going to say something, not name names, that almost boils my blood, but at the same time, it's a trap that I can sometimes fall into. I heard a designer, again, I won't name names, playing a game with a group, and then they'd finished the game, and then the group was saying, oh, well, it seems like I wasn't able to win. Once it got to this point, I didn't feel I could win anymore. And then the designer jumped in and said, oh, well, you know what? So if you'd done this, and then that, and then that, and then that, you totally could have won. And I was like, oh my, and then just carried on lecturing them about how they could have won. And I wasn't even part of this playtest. This was, I'm not going to say where it was or whatever, but we were in independent groups. Let's say we were close, but I was overhearing all this, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, you're wasting all this time that these people are giving you energy. These people are willing to let you talk. Maybe they would be willing to talk themselves. You're taking away from the inputs that you're able to give. And then the interesting thing is, about 20 minutes or half an hour later, after I'd finished my own game, and someone said, oh, you know what? I can't remember what the point they made was, but there was something they said that I was like, that is definitely mathematically wrong. But just having heard someone else make that mistake, I made sure to, pardon my language, shut up and not say anything and just try and listen, because there's the old thing that perception is reality. And if someone feels like they can't win, or if someone feels like something's totally unbalanced, then, and it's a really important lesson to shut up. So with that being said, I will now shut up and give it back to you, Matthew.
I think I have a feeling we're thinking of the same designer. I think there's, but anyway, actually it's interesting. If I'd say the most challenging playtesting experience,
I hope it's not me.
No. I would say kind of right now, maybe it's a bit different, and maybe it's not really what the question is getting at. But for example, right now we've been developing this expansion for Monumental, and it was on Kickstarter. And to be honest, right now, that's pretty much the most challenging playtest experience I have, because I've had to kind of do it all myself. Normally, you know, you would have it because it's at that playtesting stage where you're trying to do balancing. You need quantity of data. You're trying to get as much as possible. But the challenge is, right, you know, we have this limit that, you know, nobody can test. It's with a French publisher. France is pretty much in complete lockdown, has been for a long time. And it's a big game as well. You know, it's a 2-hour game. It's one of the most complex games. So, you know, you've got that combination of not a lot of playtesters, a huge game. I've been trying to playtest it myself a lot, essentially, like play it 2 or 3-handed. But there's just only so much that you can do without just getting completely, you know, kind of exhausted or fed up. But when I said that, you know, sometimes you have to just go like, I've done what I can, you know, it did get to that point with that. You know, you want to make the best thing possible, and you want to do the, you know, your due diligence. But there is a point where you just go, I can't, you know, that we're under extraordinary circumstances. And I would say right now is that I think the removal of the social aspect of playtesting is for me is actually is also a big challenge, because I think I'm not someone who naturally enjoys playtesting probably, but the nice thing about having a group is you'd go to a group every week, and that was fun. That was a social thing. You'd go out to a pub and yes, you'd be playtesting games, but you got to catch up with friends and you chat and you know, that kind of tricked you into like doing that every week and enjoying it. But it's very different now with like, oh, I have to log on, you know, I have to schedule a meeting in my calendar and I have to log on to a Discord at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night and we have to turn on tablets. You know, it really changes that that experience. So I'd say like generally the challenge of the pandemic is for me my most challenging playtesting experiences.
Rita, what was your most challenging playtest experience?
I playtest one time. I playtest with 4 person, and there were experienced playtesters, also designers. And at some point, the designer, another playtester, I didn't understand each other and getting louder and louder. And at the end, they shout at each other. And I'm just sitting there, and then, oh, I hope they don't fight now. So this was very uncomfortable. So so me and the other playtesters, which was not involved, tried to slow the situation down and say, okay, and try to translate what they mean. And this was not so much fun.
Yeah, that sounds really horrible. I mean, I guess playtesting is always the skills that you can use in eliciting feedback and in negotiating those difficult things. It's the same communication skills. I mean, look, reading books on communication and stuff generally can help, but sometimes some personalities are just too hot-headed for whatever reason.
The problem was not I think the person. The problem was that they don't understand they didn't understand each other, and they said, no, I mean this, and when you do this and do this, no, you do this and do this, and then it's getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and then it was somewhere. Yeah.
I've got 2. My most challenging playtest experience as a playtester was I think it was Charlie and I. We were invited to do a playtest with a couple of new designers. I can't remember who invited, and I don't remember the names of the designers either. We were invited to do a playtest of a game which they had designed, and we went to a pub to do this. I think it was a room in a pub they had, or something, or a place in a pub, and they presented this game to us, which we played. It was kind of a risk type variant thing, and the designers, particularly one of them, the lead designer, was incredibly arrogant. I think one of the most arrogant people I have ever met, who started by saying, and this was about 10 years ago, started off by saying, this is such a great game, it's going to replace Risk in the board games market. Okay, so this is the starting point of a game which we're playing, and I've been asked to playtest and help these guys. So we played the game, and yeah, it was what you would expect. It was a kind of Risk variant, which was not innovative at all, and it was one of those situations where you had to bring those people up to a starting position. So this was incredibly difficult to get through to the lead designer, that there's more. The market isn't. The board game market is completely different from what you think the board game market is. But to do this in a way which got through a level of arrogance that was astronomical. Fortunately, the other guy was slightly more amenable, and so I think we did a reasonable job in in getting the person to first base. I hope that they're still out there designing things, because I think there was, that there were some ideas there. They weren't really very credible ideas, but it was that was a really difficult, very challenging experience, because you don't want to just completely destroy the game. You need to be positive when you're giving feedback to new designers. In our view, already. But you need to. We have met a lot of designers who don't know the market, but mostly new designers have some humility, and they very often recognize that they don't know much, and that's why they're coming to you as somebody who's been doing it for several years. But to meet that level of arrogance was quite amazing, and quite an interesting experience as to how to deal with it, because I'd not met that level of arrogance before, and he still had that level of arrogance at the end, even when he hadn't heard of Board Game Geek. He hadn't heard of other games, common games that we all know at all.
So is this game actually published?
No, not as far as I'm aware. No, but it was a prototype, you see. But the second one is just to echo some of what Matthew said. The hardest, the most challenging game playtesting experience I've had as a designer has been playtesting Kingmaker in COVID. Because this is a complex game, and we're doing it on Tabletopia. So I am so grateful for our playtesters for this, because we've been having to get over the technical issues of Tabletopia while playtesting a game which, with the best one in the world, even face to face with the design we have got here, it's going to be 2 hours, 3 hours face to face probably. But here we're talking at a kind of average time of 4 hours, and at least a third of the time we're taking up here is battling through the interface. Literally, just taking a card can be quite a traumatic experience. And then you've got people because of people's technology, the technology varies. So you've got somebody with a Mac or somebody on an iPad or something where they have to do things very differently. Now, they may know Kingmaker quite well. Now, most of my playtesters know Kingmaker, or the old Kingmaker, so they're familiar with that part of the interfacing with the game. But Tabletopia can cause like 5 minutes to take a card, for crying out loud. Or we can have an experience where we're playing a 4-player. The worst one I had was playing a 4-player game recently, and about a third of the way through the game, one of the players has got really problems with internet connection. It just happens to be bad connections and dropping out, coming back in 5 minutes later and trying to do things. And the trouble is, in Tabletopia, if you've got cards in hand and somebody drops, those cards are still in that person's hand. So, it's really tricky. Or somebody accidentally deals cards to everybody instead of taking cards. So everybody's got to give the cards back. Delays on the line. We actually had a gap of half an hour of the play test while we were trying to get tech issues sorted out. This was a game where I was supposed to be observing, not playing, and in the end, he had to drop and I had to play take his seat and play his game for him, which was a shame. So those are the real major challenging ones, and I'm so grateful that I've got playtesters who understand this, and they are prepared to play Kingmaker, even though these things happen, and that is just fantastic.
I think what I'm going to suggest is, if it's okay with the three of you, because we were going to talk about iteration in 2 weeks' time, maybe it's worth postponing that to 4 weeks' time, and next time we meet in 2 weeks, we could talk about playtesting now in the years 2020, 2021, in this world that we live in, playtesting online, what that means to us, how that has influenced us, and take a wee break from this kind of, we might get into some tangents of, frankly, mine will be a quick one, but if we can push, if you three are happy with that, let's push aside all this digital thing, because I'm hearing lots of challenges. did you want to say, Rita?
I want to say about that the Game Designers Association, so Spieleautorenzunft, is having an academy, an online academy, and on the 12th of March we are they're having an academy about Tabletopia, tabletop simulators. So if you are interested in these themes, you can connect the Game Designers, as you say, association, and all the dates are on the homepage.
Have they got an English stream for that now? Because I think they were talking about it's the German stream mainly, isn't it?
So I think this is a German stream, but so maybe if you are write them and say, hey, we are so much interested in that theme, maybe they also do it in English. So
I think they were looking. I think last I heard they were looking for an English person to do an English stream for it.
Okay.
I don't know if they've got somebody to do that.
I don't know.
But that will be, I just checked, on the Friday after we next meet, so we can have the links and talk a wee bit more about that at the end of the next show. I'd like to just ask one quick question, well, two very quick questions before we finish up and start finishing up and wrapping up the show. In terms of, yeah, we've got some comments. Robert, who says sometimes they do the ego stroking by asking playtesters, hey, would you ever play it again? Honestly, like Matthew said, we are not robots, so I think that's perfectly legitimate. You know what? If you need to do that ego stroking, then why not? And yeah, I'm sure, you know, if you can't do things, you know, especially in this day and age, that's totally fair. And, you know, take your time getting into things.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that, TTS. I decided on Tabletopia, but that's a whole raft of issues on there.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks' time. So let me quickly ask you, is a playtest ever pointless? And if it is pointless, then why? Matthew, when is a playtest pointless, if you agree with the implicit premise?
Yeah, I guess I'll twist it slightly. I think continuing a playtest can be pointless more often than a whole playtest being pointless. I think there's plenty of times where even 5 or 10 minutes into a game, you've kind of got everything you need to know, and you could stop. And realistically, you're not going to get, or the information you're going to get after that point is not going to be any more useful than, or is going to be sort of tainted by the fact that something else doesn't work. So I think not being afraid to just sort of stop playtesting if something is obviously wrong, or if you've got what you want out of the playtest, I think that's fine. So.
Rita, when is a playtest pointless? Do you think a playtest is ever pointless?
So maybe when you first playtest it with yourself and it doesn't work, so maybe then a playtest with a group is pointless. So maybe. Yep.
Alan?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. The worst one I had of those, if it's worst, I don't know, it's useful to have it break. I was playing I think it was about an eight player game, a miniatures war game, one of our early Mission Command Normandy ones. We had 8 players, 2 umpires, and it was fairly clear within half an hour of the start that the whole movement system was broken. so we decided, we stopped after about an hour, and thought, well, actually what we'll do, we'll use it as a training exercise. We know what we want to do. We know kind of vaguely what we want to do to change it a bit. But in the meantime, we'll do a little bit of training on World War II tactics with the guys. So it was not. This was a whole day. It was supposed to be a whole day playtesting, and we had about an hour, and decided to call it and spend the rest of the day doing something useful for everybody around the table, but not playtesting. So you just have to sometimes stop, and I think that's perfectly valid. The worst thing you can do in that situation is try to keep going and inflict the pain on everybody.
Okay, so the final question I'll ask, and we can do this a bit more next time because this was a question that I had in the YouTube description, which is maybe a reason that I should actually stop streaming onto YouTube and just chuck it up there afterwards, where I can actually make sure that the description matches what we actually said rather than what I planned for us to say. But just one tip for better information, feedback, observations. My one would be to think about who you invite to playtest and get to know your playtesters. Matthew, what's your one tip?
Can I skip? Let me think about it. Someone else. I don't know.
Okay. Alan.
My one tip: listen more, say less.
Nice. Rita.
Ask open questions. And know about yourself what you want to test. And as you said, Bess, know your testers. This is very, very important.
That's all really good. I see you both said things I probably would have said. I think ultimately just respecting your playtesters, which is to do with getting to know them, whether it's calling a playtest early or buying them a drink or something or whatever. I think it's just appreciating, or even just verbally, being thankful for what they're doing. I would say that's if you're doing that, I think you'll probably be fine in the long run. And it's more fun. It's definitely, when you get on with your playtesters, it's a much more it's less like work, which is a good thing.
I have one more.
We can hear. So hold that thought. Keep it in your head for in 2 weeks' time, and we can use it as a sneak preview. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be talking more about more tips for communication. We'll be talking more about that. That's what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks' time. And I just want to acknowledge Rob's comment. It's really weird when you say, I think we've learned everything we can about the game and try to stop the playtest, but the players insist on continuing, even when the game is in the process of crashing. I mean, that's probably a good sign that there's something really compulsive and arresting. But I want to say thank you, everyone. This has been a great chat. What have we chatted about? We've chatted about Calico, dynasties, how to do tests, falling water. We talked about German and idioms and foxes saying hello to hares. We talked about why playtesting is brilliant, because of the excitement, because we want creating problems, because we don't have enough problems in our life, apparently. We talked about enjoying that sense of progress, keeping ourselves humble, learning about all the differing opinions that are out there, and having that joy when your mental model becomes a reality. We talked about how people are brilliant and different, how when you've got bluffing and secrecy, it's kind of difficult to test those, but you can test if there's an economy, obviously. You can get the numbers broadly correct, but some games just need other people to test. It's not. Playtesters should be fit for purpose. So if you want a casual game, go for more casual players. Do explore the people who reflect your game, but also people who are able to put themselves in the shoes of other players and people who are willing to overlook things. Ultimately, what people need to do as playtesters is firstly engage, secondly communicate. Engage with the game, give it a bit, be willing, at least on the onset. If it's a terrible game, then you can say that, and you can say, you know what, I'm just not going to play this anymore. This is a 3-hour game. This is doing my head in, sorry. But at least be prepared to engage and give feedback, explain why, explain what you're feeling. Sometimes you want people who play normally, sometimes you want people to try crazy things. Be friendly to playtesters, as Rita said. We talked about qualitative, quantitative, expecting feedback and opinions, not ideas, problems, not solutions. We talked about what's good. Well, having a clear direction, breaking early, having that reassurance. Remember, we are not robots, so even a playtest that strokes your ego a wee bit is all good. Do we want to playtest again? Sometimes just the fact that you want to keep working on a game. or for that matter, you feel ready to send it off to a publisher, means that it was a good playtest. We talked about the different types of playtests, mainly from Alan and Rita. From Alan, we had, does it work? The designer playing, the designer observing, blind testing for specific features, qualitative, quantitative, component testing. From Rita, we had, is it fun? Does it make sense? How long is it? Is there anything new or special? Balancing. Remember, we can only do so much. Casual games, yeah, we talked about how you should play those. We talked about, remember, your game will not replace some insert big mass market game here, whether that's, something that's, there's inertia. Listen to your people. Yeah, COVID has challenged people. Obviously, this is a relatively minor inconvenience compared to the death that a lot of people are experiencing. And I don't want to minimize the trauma that other people are experiencing to have lost their very close ones. And so, honestly, my lots of love and my heart goes out to you. But it is obviously making all parts of life that little bit more difficult, because playtesting is such a social experience of being around the table. But respect your playtesters. Don't waste their time. Stop the playtest if you need to. If it doesn't work well solo, maybe don't play it multiplayer. Listen, ask open questions, know your testers, and RESPECT. Find out what it means to me and these three. Yeah, I'm not going to actually we're not actually going to talk about respect, but that could be a show in itself. Let's talk about respect. Some people just have the desire to finish things. Alex mentioned regarding people just being compelled to finish a game. Yep, I can totally agree with that. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful show. And if you want to check me out, I am stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bigcartel.com, twitter.com/stuffbez, instagram.com/stuffbez, twitch.tv/stuffbez. I am streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time. Well, I say that, but I'm streaming tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time, then Thursday, and then Friday I'm not. So I'm no longer streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time. I'll have to find something else to say quickly. youtube.com/stuffbez. For the old episodes, stuffbybez.com/discord. So check us out there. So let's talk about everyone else. Where can you be found? Where do you like to be found? Let's go in semi-arbitrary clockwise order. Alan.
I'm Bentham Fish on Twitter, and I'm Alan at alanpaull.co.uk or Alan at surprise.games.co.uk on email and various things there.
And Rita.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Rita on Fire, or every 1 or 2 weeks on my podcast, also on YouTube, called Spielen aufs Ohr. Yeah.
And finally, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm Wise Goldfish on Twitter, probably the best place, and on Twitch, MT Dunstan, streaming Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I'll be leading into Bez tomorrow, as I normally do.
And yeah, so that's 9 a.m. UK time tomorrow, and what time?
4 p.m. UK time on Mondays and Fridays.
So I want to say once more, thank you to everyone. Of course, you three on the screen, Alan, Matthew, Rita, you have all been fantastic. Thank you for coming on, giving me your energy, and you can give me feedback privately or textually after the show if there's anything that you think could be done better or whatever. But I want to say a massive shout out to everyone. I'm not going to shout out people specifically, but you've all been amazing. There's all so much good chat. It's been wonderful seeing so many names pop up. Lots of love. And it's been wonderful having you all interact, ask the good questions, make amusing. It's just been super lovely. And the final thing that I ask is, over to you. What are you up to? You can share anything you want to. Whether it's exciting or boring or serious or frivolous or something that you're looking forward to, or just something that you really want to get done and you're like, why didn't I do it already? I should have really taken these photos on Saturday and just done it and sent them over. But that is what I'm going to do. Should I eat first or should I take photos? I never know, because maybe if I take the photos and then I eat, I'll be more motivated to take the photos and then send them over. But anyway, that is something I'm going to definitely try to do. I've also got to make a big business meeting at 1 p.m. and I'm going to have some sort of lunch at some point. I'm also streaming tonight. I'll talk about that later. Alan, what are you up to?
I'm going to have a relaxing afternoon and evening doing Kingmaker. No, I've been pushing this book. If you're a wargame designer or a wargames player, if you haven't got a copy of this, Peter Perler's The Art of Wargaming. That's one you want to get. It's from John Curry, History of Wargaming Project. Peter Perler is the father of modern wargaming. He's great. To get that book.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm going to be doing Kingmaker, so that's my week sorted.
Rita.
Yeah, I have to watch some Star Wars movies because this is what I'm doing this week, because in our next podcast we're making a Star Wars special, and so I have to refresh a few things. So
what a hardship.
Yeah.
Matthew.
And I'm actually doing some playtesting this afternoon, and meetings and things like that. So yeah, should be nice.
Nice. So a couple of Rob is looking forward to meeting with Rob. I assume Rob meant meeting with Alex, and Alex is hopefully meeting Rob. So apparently Rob's just meeting with themselves. Rob's not. Anyway, I'm just yanking your chain. And have a good day all. I'm at the games night tonight on the Giant Brain Discord. That sounds really cool, yeah. And Giant Brain, fun people. And I love this wee thing from Alex. Bye-bye. Thank you for... But as you playtest and you improve your language, it took me a while to get that. It has been lovely having you all. And yeah, if you want to check me out, my next streams are stuffbybez.com/streams. I will explain what's going on over there. Tonight we are playing Balanceable, which is a word game. You can play along. All you need to bring is a bit of paper and a pen or pencil. I will draw cards. I'll see if I can get my thing. Anyway, I just show them and you say, okay, that's the card. And then you put things on left or right. You grow a word 2 sides. You need to balance the 2 directions. You need to balance your 2 longest words. And it's a wee bit of a tricky word game. Then Wednesday, I'm meeting Paul Stapleton, and Thursday is my epic 300th stream before I stop streaming for a day. I don't think there's many people who can say, hey, I'm going to stop streaming for a day, and it's actually got some sort of impact. And it's like a big deal. Because I already feel like a sense of loss. I was walking around and thinking, my God, I'm not going to have a stream on Friday. I'm going to lose my streak. But yeah, if you are interested in any of that stuff, share, spread the word. We are going to raid someone, Idol Michael. Yep, that's who we're going to raid. And do you have any last words?
Thanks everyone for watching. And thank you personally.
Okay, so that is the end of the show. And that is time to say bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Wait, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, bye. Bye bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye bye, bye, bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Now I'm going to make you awkwardly sit here for 10 seconds.
Surprise twist ending.
Yeah, you just stare at each other.
Well, Alan's just decided to get around it by just going out of frame. That's smart move, Alan. Power move. Just slowly, sort of.
Yeah.
slink
Bye,
across
everybody. Probably bye, everybody. But Bez will never get up streaming, so it's probably going to go on forever. This.
You can press rate to go make it go faster. That is totally true.
Oh, Matt's gone. Bye, Matt.
Bye.
Bye, Matt. Oh, there he is. He's come back.
Just doing the awkward sound.
It's not awkward at all. Fine. Just means I can show my book again. Look, you see, it's going to. You see, there you go. Remember, paper.
That'll make the stream end.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.